Hi kids! If you are watching this video, that means that you have chosen to add a bookmark to your sketchbook. Now, even if you're not adding a bookmark to your sketchbook, we are still going to follow the same steps that you watched in the previous demonstration on how to add your book back. Now, in that video demonstration, I showed you how to measure out your book back, how to add glue to it, and place it onto the side with binder clips to dry. Now, if you're adding a bookmark, you have a couple of additional steps to make sure that your bookmark is in place in between your book back and your book itself. So if you are here, that means you have your bookmarks ready to go that you are going to add. I'm going to show you an additional optional step that you can add as well. I'm going to show you how to add what's called a headband to your book back. Now, ideally, if we were making books and had all the bookmaking materials, the headband is its own piece that would be added to the book back here. Your bookmarks would go in between those two, so kind of like this. And we saw this in the parts of a book image that I showed you, but it would be like this. You would have the book back, the headband, and then you would have your bookmark, and all of this would go onto the back of your book. Now, what I'm going to show you here is how you can create a headband using a piece of paper, because typically a headband is made from like a really stiff piece of chipboard. But we don't have chipboard, and we don't want to use a really big piece of cardboard because that might mess up the spacing in between your book. So I'm going to show you how you can finish the top of your cardboard so it looks like it's really nice and clean, because some of you may not like the way that just the regular cardboard looks when it's added. So if you can see here, this shows you what it looks like with just the cardboard added there. There's nothing backed around it. This one's still drying. So if you don't add the headband, you're going to be able to see your cardboard piece. If you're like me and you're a little bit extra and you like your objects to be finished and really clean and neat, not that that's not clean and neat, but you like to add a little extra something to your book, you might want to add a headband to your book back. So I'm going to take it one step further. If you have some decorative paper, what you're going to do is cut two pieces, and they don't have to be super perfect. They just need to be small enough that they can go around the book back here and be glued to the top. So pretty much what I did was I laid my book back right here, folded my paper over, and once you have this in place, you're just going to add a little glue. So you would take your Elmer's glue, place a little dab right there, line this up, place a little dab right there, fold it, and while you're working on your other pieces, you can kind of keep it together using a binder clip like that, and it should dry fairly quickly. But I usually like to do this step first, and then I'm going to work with my bookmarks and all of that. So I'm going to show you how I took my book backs and my headbands one step further. So if you will have noticed from my previous demonstrations and the pictures that I showed you in class, the bag that I'm using had really nice thick handles, and I knew I didn't want to get rid of these. I knew I wanted to incorporate these into my sketchbook. I didn't want them to be part of my tie closure, although now that I'm looking at them, I might change my mind and have my tie closure come out from the side rather than across the top. But we'll talk about that later on. I knew I wanted to use bits and pieces of this ribbon. So I'm actually going to add a book or a headband to my book back using the ribbons so that when it's finished, it looks like this. So you'll see the top of the ribbon. Let me see if I can zoom in on that for you. So let me zoom in. Oh, it doesn't want to let me. There we go. So when the piece is finished, this is what you'll see. You'll see this really nice ribbon top, and that's what's going to show on the top of my book right here. So when my book's on its side, it's going to look like it has a really nice finished ribbon, and then my bookmark is going to be right in between that. So I'm going to place it right there, and now I have this finished edge and my really nice bookmark right there. Now, like I said, this is an optional step. You do not have to add this, but if you're like me and you want to challenge yourself, I'm going to say go for it. Okay, so let's get our book our headbands ready for this. Now, I cut a piece of ribbon, and what you might notice is that when you cut ribbon, it can start to fray along the edge, and it will continue to shed and it will continue to unravel if you don't finish it. So what I did, and if you do this step, you have to have a parent or guardian with you. But what I did was I just held this up against a lighter very quickly. And because this is made of a little bit of plastic, it just finishes the edge and it seals it. Now, again, if you are doing this step, you must have a parent or guardian with you, because it's very easy, if you're not paying attention and you're not moving quick enough, have your parent or guardian show you how you can kind of melt the edges so it doesn't fray. But if you don't want to go that far, a piece of paper works just fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little tiny dab of my glue right here. Oops, that was a little bit more than I wanted. I can spread that there. I'm going to put a little bit of the extra here and here. And I can even move a little bit of this extra up here. So be careful that your glue doesn't do what mine just did. So I'm going to place my book back right there. I'm going to take my piece of ribbon. I'm going to kind of fold that over. And if I notice that I need a little bit more, I can add a little bit more. I'm even going to use the glue that dropped on my ruler. So I'm going to show you how you can clean that up as well. If you do need a little bit more glue, but it looks like this is still, it's going to seal pretty well. Just scoop that up on your finger, place it right onto the book back. And you may notice, if you are using a fabric ribbon like me, that it may kind of come through a little bit, but that's okay because my glue will dry clear. And if you're using Elmer's glue, that will dry clear as well. So we're going to repeat this process. Again, making sure that we don't spill too much glue. And I'm going to add it to the front of my book back, the back of my book back. And I just kind of like to spread it just a little bit so that I can put a little bit of the excess right here, right there. And I'm going to place this down. I'm going to fold this over. I'm going to give that a little pinch. If you need to get a napkin to wipe your hands, you can. But now I'm going to let this sit for a second. And I'm just going to add my binder clips to this just to hold it in place. Shouldn't take too long to dry, but just in case, I want to make sure that's really pinched on there. I also want to make sure that my lines are even. So if you need to even that out, you can. Let me double check my second one. Yep, those lines are nice and even, making sure that I'm giving that a press. Okay. So while that's sitting off to the side and drying, my next step is that I have to get my bookmarks in place. Now, I have two ribbons that are slightly thicker than some of the bookmarks that we saw from my inspiration. So you'll notice that in my inspiration notebook, this ribbon or bookmark is really, really thin. And I knew that I didn't want a thin bookmark like this. But because my bookmarks are a little bit thicker, I do have to make some adjustments. So I took my two bookmarks, I stacked them on top of each other, and I just gave them a quick little stitch just to hold them in place. Now you don't have to stitch them. You can still use your glue and glue them together, but I have found that your bookmarks stay in place better when they're stacked on top of each other and either stitched or glued, so that when you move them, they just kind of move at an angle like that. So what I also did was I took a look at the side of my book and I kind of played with the placement of my bookmark, and I kind of decided, like, what part of my bookmark, how far do I want it to go? So I had to work with that a little bit, and I found that I wanted it to be kind of mirrored, like I wanted my labels to be mirrored from each other like this. and I wanted it to show down at the bottom. And I like a longer bookmark. That's just personal preference. If you like a shorter bookmark, feel free to trim it. But for me, I know that I like a longer bookmark. So I kind of played with the placement, and once I figured out where I wanted them to go, I marked it on the back of my book so that I knew where I wanted to glue this down. Now I just used a regular marker, nothing fancy, just to kind of mark this where I wanted it. And now while that's drying, I'm going to glue this in place. So I'm going to add a little extra glue here. And I don't want to go all the way to the top with this because I want my bookmarks to be able to move freely. And because I'm using fabric bookmarks, I needed to add a little bit of extra glue. So I kind of filled that like that. I'm going to put the excess that I have on my finger right here on my bookmark itself. And I'm going to line it up where I want it to go. And I'm going to pinch that into place. And while it's drying for a few minutes, I'm going to set my binder clip on there so that it seals. But now I've got my bookmarks where I want them to go, and they can dry. All right. Now, once you have all those pieces in place, you can come back over here to your book back, and we can prep this one a little bit more. Because if you'll notice, this is going to have a little bit of extra, like off to the side. So I'm going to trim that just a little bit. And I have to be very careful that I don't cut my actual book back. So I trimmed a little extra there. And because I don't want this to fray, I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to finish my edge. But again, that's completely up to you. You don't have to because it will be sealed. Okay. So now that I have these kind of pinched on there, they're sealed on there, I finished my edges how I want them to go, and I let this sit for just a little bit, I'm going to add my book back. And it's okay if this is not dry. There we go, 100%. Because I'm going to put the binder clips over it again anyways. Now this is where you may need somebody to help you. You may need somebody to help you hold this stuff in place while you put your book back on with its headbands, and then you add your actual binder clips to it. So now we're going to follow those same exact steps that we did in the previous video. I'm going to add some glue here, all the way down. I'm going to smear this on there. Again, I want to make sure that I have enough glue on there. If I feel any areas that I feel like might be too dry, I can go back and add a little more, like the center part. And right there, needed just a little bit more. But again, I don't want to add too much at once because I don't want it to spill outside of the seam. Now, I'm going to add some here, and I'm going to add a little bit of extra to the center because this is the only part of my book that didn't get glued because I knew I would be adding my book back. I'm going to layer my bookmark like this. And again, you'll notice I added a little bit of extra, but I'm going to clean that up if I need to. And I'm just being very careful with how I kind of pat that on there. Pat that down like that. And now I'm going to flip this. And like I said, this is where you might need somebody to help you out. I'm going to press my book back on there. I'm using the side of my hand because my fingers have a lot of glue on them right now. I'll use a piece of paper to kind of wipe off the excess there. But now I'm going to press these on here, really press to make sure that it seals and that it's all touching. And you'll see that as I press this, the glue is starting to come out of the sides, and that's okay. Don't worry if it does, we're going to clean that up. But the whole point of me pressing this down is to make sure that it's really, really on there. And if this part gets a little bit messy, that's okay because we are going to cover it. Now I'm going to take my big binder clips. And at this point, you actually might need binder clips that are slightly bigger than these. But we're going to test this out. And like I said, I don't have the strongest hands, but I'm going to try. I'm going to squeeze those on there. Ooh, it worked. Perfect. There we go. This part always makes me a little bit nervous because I want to make sure that it's all in place. Perfect. There we go. Now, if your book doesn't go all the way down or your binder clip doesn't go all the way down, that's okay. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it on its side, and anywhere that I have extra bits of glue, I'm just going to push them into the spaces. Push those into the spaces. And remember, my glue or your Elmer's glue is always going to dry clear. I'm going to flip it again. I'm going to do the same thing. Now you may have to push this a little bit more if you stitched your book and also if you're adding the bookmark. Got a nice little push. Get that all sealed. And now what I like to do, once I get those on there and I'm able to kind of push and kind of move my glue, we're going to take a closer look at this edge right here that has the bookmark. I'm going to try my best to not kind of ruin my book back. Actually, this is kind of lifting a little bit, so I might not fuss with it too much. But I do like to kind of pinch this over this part right here so that it kind of folds the headband and the bookmark down so that that part really, really sticks because I don't want that to come loose. So this part right here, what I did was I just kind of wiggled my binder clip up a little bit so that it was directly over my bookmarks and the book band, the headband. Okay, now once you have all those pieces in place, you are free to let this sit. And while it's sitting, you are going to work on the cover for your sketchbook.